The rain hammered against the windows of Riverside Cafe that Tuesday afternoon, turning the streets outside into rivers of grey. Inside, the warm glow of pendant lights and the rich aroma of brewing coffee created a sanctuary from the storm. Emma Carter, a 24-year-old waitress with tired eyes but an unfailing smile, wiped down the counter for what felt like the 100th time that day. She had another shift at the grocery store starting in 3 hours and 2 assignments due for her community college classes by midnight. But Emma never complained. Complaining was a luxury she couldn't afford. What Emma didn't know was that in exactly 7 minutes a man would walk through that door who would change her life forever. But he wouldn't look like salvation. He would look like someone the world had forgotten. To understand what happened next, you need to know who Emma Carter really was. She wasn't born into struggle, but it found her anyway. Her mother had passed away from cancer when Emma was just 17, during her senior year of high school. Her father, Michael, a hard-working mechanic, had been the rock of their family until a horrific workplace accident left him paralyzed from the waist down. In one moment, their lives shattered. Suddenly, Emma became the primary breadwinner for her family. Her 2 younger siblings, Daniel, aged 15, and Sophie, aged 12, depended on her. She worked 2 jobs, sometimes 3 during holidays, juggling classes at the local community college, where she studied business administration. Her dream of a 4-year university had been shelved indefinitely. Most nights, Emma survived on 3 hours of sleep, coffee, and determination. But here's what made Emma different. Despite everything she carried, despite the weight of responsibility that would crush most people her age, she remained kind. She still smiled at customers who yelled at her. She still slipped extra fries to kids whose parents looked stressed. She still believed that small acts of kindness mattered, even when the world seemed determined to prove her wrong. At exactly 2:17 p.m., the bell above the cafe door chimed. Emma looked up from refilling the sugar dispensers and saw him, an elderly man, perhaps in his 70s, completely drenched from the downpour outside. His coat hung on his frail frame like a tarp, 3 sizes too large and frayed at the edges. His shoes, barely holding together, squeaked with each shuffling step. Water dripped from his grey hair onto the worn tile floor. The cafe wasn't crowded. Maybe a dozen people scattered across the tables. But Emma watched as a young couple near the window wrinkled their noses and whispered to each other. A group of college students who had been laughing loudly moments before suddenly grew uncomfortable, gathering their belongings as if preparing to leave. One businessman actually pulled his laptop bag closer as though the old man might steal it. The elderly man didn't seem to notice, or perhaps he was simply used to it. He made his way to a corner booth in the back, settling into the worn vinyl seat with a heavy sigh. His hands trembled as he tried to smooth down his wet coat. Emma grabbed a menu and a glass of water, walking over with the same warm smile she gave every customer. "Good afternoon, sir," she said brightly. "That rain came out of nowhere, didn't it? Can I get you something warm to drink?" The man looked up, and for a moment Emma saw something in his eyes. Not just exhaustion, but a profound sadness that seemed to run deeper than any physical discomfort. "Just a coffee, please," he said, his voice barely above a whisper, rough and weathered like old parchment. "Coming right up," Emma replied. "Cream and sugar?" "Black is fine. Thank you." Emma returned 5 minutes later with a steaming cup of dark roast coffee and a small plate with 2 freshly baked chocolate chip cookies. "Here you go, sir. And these are on the house, just came out of the oven." The man stared at the cookies, then looked up at her with confusion. "I didn't order these." "I know," Emma said gently, "but you look like you could use something sweet on a day like this." The elderly man reached into his coat pocket, fumbling with unsteady hands. Emma could see what was happening before he even pulled out the worn wallet. His fingers trembled as he opened it, and even from where she stood she could see it was nearly empty. Maybe a few dollar bills, certainly not enough to cover even a coffee. His shoulders sagged with shame. "I thought I had... I apologize. I shouldn't have..." Emma held up her hand, her voice gentle but firm. "Sir, the coffee's on me today, and so are the cookies. Please enjoy them." "I don't accept charity," the man said, his pride wounded but his voice weak. Emma knelt slightly beside the booth so they were at eye level, her voice warm and sincere. "This isn't charity, it's kindness. And kindness isn't something you owe back, it's just something we give because we're human beings sharing this strange, difficult world together." The old man's eyes glistened, whether from emotion or rain, Emma couldn't tell. He looked at her for a long moment, as though seeing something he'd forgotten existed. "I used to believe that," he whispered. "A long time ago, before the world taught me that everything has a price." Emma smiled softly. "Then maybe today's a good day to remember that some things still don't." She stood and walked away before he could protest further, returning to the counter to help other customers. She didn't think about recognition or reward. She didn't even think the moment was particularly special. For Emma, this was just Tuesday. What Emma didn't know, what no one in that cafe knew, was that the man sipping coffee in the corner booth was Richard Blackwell, founder and former CEO of Blackwell Global Enterprises, one of the most successful real estate and investment conglomerates in the world. His net worth, at its peak, had exceeded $8 billion. 5 years earlier, Richard had lost everything that mattered. His wife, Catherine, and his only son, Thomas, had died in a private plane crash while traveling to their vacation home in Colorado. The tragedy destroyed him, but what came after the tragedy almost finished him completely. In the months following the accident, Richard discovered that almost everyone in his life had ulterior motives. Business partners tried to force him out of his own company. Extended family members he barely knew suddenly appeared with lawyers, challenging his will and claiming they deserved portions of his estate. Former friends called asking for loans they never intended to repay. His massive charity donations were met not with gratitude, but with demands for more. Richard realized that no one saw him. They saw his bank account. So he disappeared. He left his CEO position, appointed a board to manage his assets, and walked away from his mansion, his cars, his entire life of privilege. For 2 years, he'd been traveling across the country in disguise, wearing thrift store clothes, carrying little money, testing humanity in the most basic way possible. Would anyone show him kindness when he had nothing to offer in return? In over 100 different towns, across 30 states, Richard had encountered indifference, cruelty, and rejection. He'd been thrown out of restaurants, ignored by countless people, even had the police called on him simply for existing in public spaces. With each passing month, his conclusion grew darker. True, selfless kindness was dead, until that rainy afternoon in Riverside Cafe. Until Emma Carter. When Emma returned to clear the corner booth an hour later, the old man was gone. The coffee cup sat empty, and the cookies had been eaten. But there was something else. A napkin with words written in shaky handwriting. "Thank you. Not just for the coffee, but for reminding me that goodness still exists in this world. You may have saved more than you know." Emma tucked the napkin in her apron pocket, smiled to herself, and went back to work. It was a nice moment, nothing more. The next day, everything changed. Emma was tying her apron, preparing for the lunch rush, when a sleek black limousine pulled up outside the cafe. She watched through the window as a man in an expensive suit stepped out, carrying a leather briefcase. He walked directly into the cafe and asked the manager, "Is Emma Carter working today?" Emma's heart raced. Had she done something wrong? Was someone suing her? The man approached her table, introduced himself as Lawrence Mitchell, attorney for Richard Blackwell, and handed her a sealed envelope. With trembling hands, Emma opened it. Inside was a handwritten letter that began, "Dear Emma, I owe you more than a cup of coffee. I owe you my faith in humanity." The letter explained everything: who Richard really was, why he had been in disguise, and what her simple act of kindness had meant to a man who had nearly given up on people entirely. But it was the second page that made Emma's hands shake. A check for $1,500,000. Emma couldn't breathe, couldn't think. She read the letter again and again, certain it must be a mistake or a cruel joke. But Mr. Mitchell assured her it was real. There was more, an invitation to meet Mr. Blackwell at his estate, and a proposition that would change not just her life, but potentially thousands of others. 3 days later, Emma stood in the grand library of Blackwell Estate, face to face with Richard Blackwell, who now looked nothing like the fragile man from the cafe. He was clean, well-dressed, distinguished, but his eyes held the same sadness she'd recognized before. "You passed a test you didn't know you were taking," Richard told her. "I've created a foundation in memory of my wife and son, the Blackwell Foundation for Human Dignity. It will fund scholarships for students like you, job training programs, emergency financial assistance for families in crisis, and shelters for those without homes. But I need someone to run it who understands what it means to struggle, who hasn't lost their compassion despite hardship. I want you to be the director." Emma was speechless. "But I'm just a waitress. I don't have experience with—" "You have something more valuable than experience," Richard interrupted. "You have character. I can teach you business. I can't teach what you already possess: genuine kindness." Emma accepted. The story went viral within weeks. Major news outlets covered it. Social media exploded with reactions. Emma's simple act of buying a stranger coffee became a global phenomenon, sparking a movement of kindness challenges across the world. The Blackwell Foundation grew rapidly, eventually helping over 50,000 people in its first year alone. Emma continued her education, earning her degree while working alongside Richard, who became like a grandfather to her. Her father received the medical care he needed. Her siblings got full scholarships to college. But Emma never forgot what Richard taught her that rainy afternoon, that the most powerful currency in the world isn't money. It's compassion. It's seeing the humanity in everyone, regardless of how they appear. It's understanding that kindness, given freely without expectation, can quite literally change the course of someone's life. In a world that often feels cold, transactional, and hopeless, Emma's story reminds us of a simple truth. Small acts of kindness create ripples we may never see. That Tuesday afternoon, Emma didn't just serve coffee. She served hope. She served dignity. She served a reminder that goodness still breathes in this world. And in doing so, she didn't just save Richard Blackwell's faith in humanity. She saved her own future and created a legacy that would touch countless lives for generations to come. Sometimes, the most extraordinary moments of our lives arrive wearing the most ordinary disguises. All we have to do is choose to see them. If this story reminded you why kindness matters, please like this video and subscribe to our channel for more true stories of hope and humanity. Share this with someone who needs encouragement today. And remember, you never know whose life you might change with a simple act of compassion. What will your coffee moment be?